Welcome to Further Ed with your host, David Schnurman, accomplished entrepreneur, innovator, and educator. Each week, Further Ed will offer an intimate look at trailblazing visionaries who have transformed the landscape of business and society at large. And now we introduce our guests and our host, David Schnurman.
Hi, welcome to Further Ed. I'm David Schnurman, your host. Further Ed focuses on internet-based companies that have passion, drive, and energy that are trying to change the landscape on how we do things. Today we have Brian Wang from Fitocracy, who's going to talk about the app and the website that he built that has been a game changer for people involved in fitness and for your own personal life as well. Thank you for being here, Brian.
Thanks for having me, David.
So, Fitocracy, what is it? And just talk a little bit about the background before we get into this.
Sure. So Fitocracy is a fitness social network that's available on iOS and web and Android coming soon. And it's designed to motivate and engage people to reach their fitness goals. So on Fitocracy, we actually turn working out into kind of a game where it's a lot more fun and addictive. Every time you're tracking a workout, you earn points and level up. You're going on these quests and earning achievements and so on. So that kind of has a fun little twist to the workout experience. And as you're doing that, you start to connect with a really great community of users all across the globe of folks who are just trying to do the same thing that you're doing. And so by connecting with those folks and building relationships with them, trading advice, feedback, experiences, and so on and so forth, you just stay a lot more motivated in the long term to reach your goals.
So it sounds like, one, it helps you motivate yourself. Forget if you took away the social component, it's still a good app because
Sure.
you can keep track of what you're doing.
Right.
And the social component is supposed to help motivate you and make it more fun and connect it with others.
The way that we think about it is that the workout tracking is super useful as a utility.
Yeah.
It's really important to track your progress, and the social element is what keeps you there in the long term. That's kind of the stickiness of the experience.
So, and here's the thing. If me and you were talking like a couple of years ago, before you even started this, what I would say was, that sounds like a great idea, good luck implementing it. Just because like there's lots of great ideas, I mean, you're going to get out there, how are you going to attract people to use it, how are you going to grow, and so now, luckily, you've done that, so I can ask you how you did it.
Yeah.
Because from what my understanding is, you have close to 1 million users?
We're close to 700, so we're going to 1 million.
I round up and I'm not
yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
So it's close to 700,000 users.
That's right.
And you've raised about $5 million? Or?
No. We're a lot leaner than that. We're just a little bit over $1 million.
$1 million,
yeah.
Okay. So most important to me is getting 700,000 users because I don't get it. Like I know lots of people who launch products and they're great ideas and they put it out there and then nothing. Or a couple thousand and then for a few weeks they have something that sort of drops off. What were you able to do? First of all, was it like that and did you have a couple different rounds to get there or was it straight up from the first launch?
So I think there was a few moments throughout the past 2 years that were really, really important in terms of our user growth. First off, and the first thing I'll say is a massive amount of it was luck. We kind of unveiled the product to a really relevant audience. I think that was lesson number one, just like making sure that your product and the messaging and the positioning was matched up with a group of people with whom that would really resonate. So we went to Reddit, which is, for those who are not familiar, it's a social news site that is generally pretty popular with tech people and geekier folks, like the children of the internet age, basically, right? And there was a fitness section there. So we said, hey, we're launching this thing called Fitocracy. We're trying to turn fitness into this RPG, like a role-playing game. We think you guys might like this. And it blew up on the fitness section there. And so that's where we got our initial kind of first couple thousand users. That was great. A couple thousand users, that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And that helped bring this initial kind of community of users. And the great thing was we kind of skipped the line. We basically imported a community in there. And that
How do you get on Reddit again?
Just made a post and I said, hey, I'm looking for feedback here. This is kind of the concept. It was like a 5-paragraph missive on kind of what
just you're working out, you want to be motivated by other people, you like video games, this is video games for working out.
It was kind of a cheesy little explanation of what this was meant to be. I was like, imagine, do you know how awesome it is to level up in real life, or how great it is to, that feeling you get when you put on, a little bit of extra weight in the bar when you're in the gym.
Yeah.
Like, we're trying to capture that moment and deliver that to you all the time.
Now, of course, ultimately, it's as good as the product is if you get people there and it doesn't really work, you're not going to keep them for long.
Sure.
Was the first phase of the product good enough that it stuck, or did you feel like you had to do a couple things really fast? If we want this to grow, we have to fix these 5 things now.
Right.
Because generally they always say, if you're proud of the first launch that you've done,
You wait too long.
You've waited too long.
Yeah. So in the beginning, we were in just furious feature building mode, right?
Yeah. Are you a developer?
So I helped develop a lot of the initial components of the website in the front end,
Yeah.
the web design and the HTML and the CSS, but I'm not a trained web developer.
So you had the article on Reddit that got you a few thousand, then what?
And then so, that just kind of grew organically over time. And we were on private invite-only beta mode.
Yeah.
So you needed an invite code to get in, and that helped immensely as a mechanism to grow the user
Sure.
base. Because there's just sense that, these things are really rare, there's a hot commodity, they got to get their hands on it. So you would often find people on Reddit being like, hey, I have an invite to Fitocracy, I can only get 10 people to use it, so here's my code and use it. And then people started spreading that all around.
What was the tipping point?
The real tipping point I think was in the summer of 2011. By that point, we had about 30,000 users that had grown through Reddit, had grown through a couple PR pieces, and then XKCD, which is this popular webcomic out there, generally attracts kind of the geekier, nerdier crowds. They did an entire kind of comic on us, which was very rare for that guy, the author or the illustrator. And that blew us up from 30 to 50,000 users in 2 weeks.
Okay, great.
So that almost doubled us in 2 weeks. And that just started creating this really critical mass of where a lot of these folks who had grown up playing video games, spent a lot of time on the internet, started just becoming more and more aware of us. And I think ever since then, it just the overall brand visibility of Fitocracy has gotten elevated to the point where people know about us, they're trying to get fit, and they hear about us, they start trying us out.
So it sounds like from what you're saying, it pretty much was a good product from the beginning. You hit the right market and people liked it. I mean, it doesn't sound, because a lot of people think they have those characteristics, but they can't get past 500 people or 1,000
Sure.
people.
A lot of it was being nimble and responding to user feedback very quickly, because in many ways we didn't know exactly what they wanted. I think what really drew in the initial audience was his hook of a concept. They're like, oh, you're turning working out into a game.
Yeah.
I get it. I totally want in on that. But it wasn't completely smooth, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have people pulling at you from different sides, and you have to really be focused on what that product's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was a perfect product then. I don't think it's a perfect product now. We're constantly trying to improve on it.
How big do you foresee it could it be in terms of users?
Ultimately, we want this to be in the several million, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of users, right? Because
it's just an app, right?
it's an app and a website.
Okay, you can do it online as well.
That's right.
Okay.
Actually, for the majority of our life, we spent as a website.
Okay.
We didn't have a mobile app until March of this year.
Okay.
But ultimately, the vision and the mission behind the company is all about how do we enable everyone to reach a better level of fitness. It doesn't matter if you're completely inexperienced or you're an advanced athlete. We want to be able to provide the means for anyone to be able to get empowered to do that.
Was it you or your partner who was overweight?
My partner was very overweight
and you were just
as
skinny.
a kid. Yeah.
So it was something that changed his life, and then obviously you were both gamers. So
Right.
combining the two long term, it seems like that's a big passion of yours. Of course, the question in the business sense comes to be, can you turn this into a revenue-based business, or is the hope some larger entity who has built-in user or revenue will buy us because it makes sense, like a Nike or something where there's that concept. Let's build it really big and have value from there.
Right.
Where do you see yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because my partner Richard and I, we always kind of talk about how, honestly, we can't imagine ourselves being more passionate about this business or any other business, really, past Fitocracy, because this is stemming from this really long-standing passion for kind of health and fitness and how important it is to us and how important it is for us to bring that to other people. So in terms of how large we want to bring it, we want to build this to be as large as possible. When it comes to the revenue model, that is something we're still seeking out, something that we're still trying to figure out. What is the most organic model we can use with this business that stays true to our values as a company and as a community?
Yeah.
And also, of course, it's scalable and it generates, sufficiently high revenue. So to the other question, like, are you going to get, acquired? Is that kind of the end game? We don't want to be sold or bought, rather. we think that there's so much more for us to do.
Sure.
Right? Like 2 years in, it's still pretty early. We want to be able to touch as many people as we can.
At this point in time, what would you say is the most realistic view or for a revenue model? Or if you had to, tomorrow you'd turn into a revenue model, what would you do?
Sure. So I think the thing that we're really starting to think about is how do we get better content in front of our users, and how do we get more training and coaching in front of our users? Because I think one of the things that you often see, you can ask anyone on the street, like, how do you get fit? Like, what's your general knowledge of what exercise and nutrition is all about? And most folks, even if they think they know, are actually generally ignorant about the best way of going about doing that. And so there's real value in having either a really good program in front of you, or a trainer, or a coach. And so being able to distribute that through our platform and our network is going to be a really interesting thing for us.
It's like you're in the right place at the right time. Fitness, is always important, and obviously online and apps is a great means of doing it.
Sure.
And so if I were you, I'd say, well, we keep doing this, we'll figure something out, because there's enough people, and if you do it right with 700,000 users, it seems like you can turn into a revenue-based model pretty fast.
Right.
If even 1% or 10% sort of feel that model makes sense. I'll tell you personally, just to give you some insight, from my input, I use Map My Run. I just train for the marathon. I pay $50 for their training course for the New York City Marathon, and they also have a lot of free services. But I have a gift for you. So this morning I downloaded your app and I looked through it. I've heard about you before, I never used it, and I really liked it. And I think it's going to be a game changer for me, because 2 to 3 weeks ago, I haven't told anybody about this. I decided, first time, you'll see why, it's a little embarrassing. I decided to have some sort of visual goals. I read the book Total Recall by Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Awesome. Yep.
I don't know if you read it.
We were at the book signing here.
Okay, so I highly recommend it for entrepreneur and fitness. One point he says the importance for him was having a visual. He had a wall in the gym where he would mark down the sets, and being able to see the visual progress is what helped him be successful. Right. And I didn't like that I wasn't working out enough because I'm not getting in the gym. So I started doing push-ups and sit-ups in the morning, but I needed some sort of goal.
Sure.
I have 4-year-old twins, so what I decided to do is have some sort of visual thing. So I printed these 2 things out, and we could show them afterwards. Nice. And we color it in every morning together after I do it. So I want to have that visual success and fill these in. Yep. They're hanging on my wall in my apartment. And so I got on your app and I saw this and I said, I feel like this is like from the 1980s, whatever it was. Yeah. I couldn't believe that it's good to have something visual, but I went on your site, I did the push-ups, I did the sit-ups in terms of the workouts, and I did it this morning, and it's exactly this on steroids, because you're interacting with 700,000 people. So it for me, will help me take it to the next level. And I just thought you would appreciate this is the old way of doing things. Yeah, yeah. So you can have this and put it in your office, and now you're the new way.
Well, pencil and paper, I think there's no reason why you can, you should have to still use that in the gym. Yeah. If everyone's equipped with an iPhone or an Android or any other smartphone, we're going to be carrying this digitally all the time with us. So why bother with killing trees on this?
So someone else I know who's overweight, he said he just lost 35 pounds by walking, and he did it through Facebook. Every time he said, I'm going to walk, he would have 50 people like it, and it was the same sort of mentality. If people are watching, then it's great. What are some of the challenges you've had? Because obviously, it sort of kills. A game is a game, so you have to win it.
Sure.
Here, all you have to do is say, I did it, and you get the accolades from the community. Right. Is there any type of watering down, or sort of just a trust-based community that if you're saying you did a push-up, you did it?
Yeah. So generally, it operates on an honor system. There's no way for us to verify whether or not you actually did what you said you did. Unlike a lot of other fitness tracking apps where it relies on GPS and accelerometers, we can go and let you log pretty much anything under the sun, right? But there's 2 things I think that we've always kept in mind. One, anyone who's going to go and bother to kind of go and troll and post a bunch of bogus stuff all the time, for one, they're going to get called out on it pretty quickly by the community. And 2, just philosophically, it's just not going to happen for very long, because it's like, what's the point of wasting all your time doing that, where you're just going to get booed by the rest of the audience out there, right? Now, granted, you could have the occasional case of someone who's padding their numbers, and so it's really hard to tell whether or not they're actually being legit. And we have had cases where users have been accused of oh, those workouts are really unrealistic for someone like you. I call BS. Sure. You should take a photo of it, or take a video, or so on and so forth.
How important? Because I see this as 2 separate products combined. There's a social aspect, and then there's the tracker.
Sure.
how important is the social aspect to, you think, the success?
Yeah, I think it's enormously important, enormously important. And we didn't realize this until later. The way that we conceptualize it now is the tracking and the gamification of the tracking is the initial hook, right? And that's always going to be there, of course. It's a very core utility. That's why people are there. That's why people come in. But when you take a look at the life cycle of your average user, the community starts kicking in maybe in the second week, or maybe a little bit in the third week or so, and that is just so critical to keeping them around, keeping them engaged. Whenever we go to speak to our users and ask, what has Fitocracy done for you? What benefit do you derive? Community is the number one thing that they always mention. Yeah. And at the end of the day, philosophically, if you want to make fitness a part of your life and you want to make that something that becomes a part of your identity, you need a tribe. It almost has to become, part of your internal culture.
Did you read tribal leadership?
Everyone
That's what it's sounding like when you're talking about it.
But it's the same idea, right? Like, you need to surround yourself with the right environment. And so just having a pencil and paper journal or like the digital equivalent is not enough, because you're just staring at numbers all day. But you're not setting yourself up with the right environment.
Let's talk about another community for a few minutes. I want to get your input there, is the tech community.
Sure.
Specifically, let's say in New York. A lot of companies have the same concept right now, that we'll focus on revenue later. Let's focus on raising money now and building user bases. What's your opinion on that? Do you think that's the right way that things should be going around?
There's no one answer. It's very quickly shifting, I think. I guess the trend or the feeling lately has been, oh man, maybe the consumer model of grow fast and worry about revenue later isn't the right move. I don't know how long that sentiment's going to last. I'm sure it'll swing the other way as well. But I think there's been some pessimism over the performance of Facebook's IPO and then Groupon and Zynga, et cetera. If you think about early stage companies and you think about the so-called Series A crunch.
There's thousands and thousands of tech space entrepreneurs who are starting companies from incubators, from venture funds or whatever it is. And a lot of them, when I've talked to them, don't really know. They're focused on raising money, they're not focused on the revenue.
I think the thing is,
they have ideas.
There's a confluence of a lot of different factors. One, there's been an explosion of early stage startups because of the wider availability of angel and venture and seed money and incubators. But then Series A investors, they have not changed the number. In fact, they might be flat or declining. Yeah. And so the number of Series A deals is not increasing proportionate to the number of seed stage companies that are emerging. So it becomes very noisy there, which means the bar is a lot higher to go and raise your Series A. So Chris Dixon said, okay, 10 million is the new 1 million, right? So that's just to illustrate a point,
sure,
right?
Of course, there's a lot of money out there.
Most companies are not going to go and reach this kind of rocket ship where they're growing like crazy, and like these guys are obviously hitting 5 million, 10 million, 100 million. Very, very hard to achieve that. You're betting, you're putting everything on black. Yeah. And it's really hard to make that bet. And I think I'm seeing a lot of companies that I know are now starting to shift more towards like, what's the revenue model? Even in the Valley, people are now starting to think about, how do we start generating revenue from day one, or what is the real story there? Because it's just not sufficient to say we're going to grow fast and not worry about revenue, because it's just a model that you can only sustain a few bets there.
And you raised money from, is it correct, 500 startups from Dave McClure?
That's right.
Tell me about that. What is that? How did you actually raise $1 million through that? And who is Dave McClure?
Sure. Yeah. So Dave McClure, he's kind of a well-known venture investor out in the Valley. He's particularly well known for traveling the globe and having a very international kind of outreach in terms of investing in different areas and geographies. So 500 Startups is his seed fund / incubator that he started, I think, 2 years ago or so. I might be off.
It sort of gives you credibility to have someone who's well known, and sort of just to get investors in general is a challenge in itself. So how did you get that process?
We got in touch with Dave back in the summer of 2011 when we first started raising money through AngelList.
Okay, sure.
So AngelList, for those who don't know, is kind of basically a social network for investors in startups, right? And so we got in touch through Dave because we kind of just came out in the scene on AngelList. We started getting some attention. He reached out to us. He said, hey, this looks interesting. Would love to chat sometime. And that's how we initially made contact. And then so I guess over a period of a couple months, We just kept in touch, and then around August, when I was telling you about how we started hitting this critical mass with that webcomic XKCD, our numbers started jumping up really, really quickly. That started building a lot more momentum,
Sure.
and then that helped us get to the point where Dave said, you should just come in for our incubator. So we actually went out to Mountain View
wow.
for 4 months in the fall of 2011 to spend 4 months out there. And so we received investment from them. We also were in the incubator, gave us a chance to be out in the Bay Area for a few months as well.
And from what I understand, these early stage investments are like convertible debt, generally,
That's
where
right.
they take a percentage, and then when the next funding comes in, that's where they convert based on
That's
that.
right.
So 700,000 users, you certainly have to be thinking about the next, I guess, Series A, is that what we're be the next round of funding?
That's right.
Is that in your head right now, and how big a funding would be your ideal number?
So Series A is definitely something that we're thinking about. One of the advantages of spending 4 months out in the Bay Area was being able to just start building relationships with them, with the investors out there. And that's the approach that I take. It's really very much about relationship building. You know, people will tell you that every single time you go and sit with a VC, you're pitching them, which is essentially true. But in many ways, it's about kind of creating a trend line with these folks and letting them see how you're hitting milestones over time. You know, Mark Suster is a great VC out in LA, amazing blogger, and he's got this great blog post that's called Lines Not Dots, and how he looks for those relationships and momentum with entrepreneurs over time. You know, he's not a fan of the model where like you meet and it's like, hey, we're closing in 2 weeks, are you going to be in or out? It's like, you know, I haven't had time to actually know who you are. Right. So that's kind of an ongoing process. You know, we're aiming for sometime in 2013 for our Series A. I think a lot of the folks that we've seen, that we know out there, early stage startups, they're also thinking about Series A. But I think one other popular trend that we've been seeing is raising a bridge round in between. And this is, I think, is very much related to the whole Series A crunch, where people have gone and raised money that gave them maybe 18 or a little bit more months of runway. And then they kind of turn and see, oh, wow, raising a Series A is actually getting a lot harder. Yeah. You know, it might be necessary for us to go raise a bridge in between to let us hit bigger and bigger milestones to get us to that point. So we're seeing that a lot with a lot of other companies out there. We might consider that as well, who knows. And so that, I think, is becoming a more popular financing trend out there.
How many times have you pitched in front of a VC? What kind of track, you know, how many times have you done that and learned through it?
Plenty of times. You know, and one of the things—
Double digit?
Yeah, for sure. And one
Good
of the
experience?
things that every single experience is a learning experience.
There you go.
Right? Because it's ultimately, as CEO and as a founder, your job is to be able to communicate the narrative of the company and what's the long-term vision. And if that's not clear in your head, that becomes very, very apparent, you know, from the first 5 seconds. And so I've definitely been in situations where I didn't have the story fully straight. Because one of the challenges as an early stage startup is that you don't always know exactly where the company is going to be,
100%.
right? And so
even as a late stage.
That's right. So your job is to be able to be very, very focused and explain in as narrow as a way as possible, like, this is who you are, why you're important, and why you should care about what I'm saying. And you just got to make sure you're distilling it into the component parts. And that can be difficult.
Even in job interviews, I see, you know, people have to understand who their own personal brand is. When you ask them a question, if they don't, you hear them figuring it out on the spot. You know, you got to spend some time focusing on that, and obviously the pitches help. What keeps you up at night? What is, you know, and I'm sure there's a couple things that just come to mind right away. Is like, when it comes to the business, what big fears do you have?
So, one of the things that's amazing about Fitocracy in my experience thus far is our users have an immense amount of love for the community, for the brand, for everything that we do. And it's fantastic. And that really excites me. What I think the so-called what keeps me up at night is going to be really, you know, can we go and just convert that into a huge business with a really great revenue model, right? Because so far, our users will stop at nothing to go and tell us how much we've helped them. But is that going to go and open up their wallets? Right. So that's the big question. And I think the other question is, as the team grows and my role shifts, am I doing a good job as CEO to lead the team, to keep them motivated, making sure that I'm removing roadblocks as much as possible so they can do their best work. And that's very, very much a work in progress. I'm learning a ton as I do this, and for sure I'm not doing as great of a job as I could be. And so that oftentimes I need to make sure that our employees are happy, they're feeling fulfilled, and they walk into the office every day feeling confident that what they're doing is just great work. So that's a large part of what I do now as well.
And that's a really great answer, because I think those are two main points, that obviously revenue and motivating people, because if you're not motivating people, revenue doesn't matter, because you're not going to build it up. So I guess for the last question would be being a co-founder. Richard and you are doing this together. What are the positives, and what are some of the challenges, I would say potentially with dealing with your employees and having a co-founder?
Well, one of the interesting things about my relationship with Richard as a co-founder is that we were best friends. We had known each other for a long time before we started the company, and people will go and say that's a good thing, that's a bad thing. There are pros and cons. Having a co-founder for me just was essential, right? There's just so much work to be done that it can be very, very daunting to go and try to do that yourself. You're going to need a team either way. And so being able to split that up with him and tackle things in a strategic manner has been enormously helpful. The other thing is, because we came at it as best friends, we know each other really well, we know each other's mannerisms, and we're able to communicate very honestly with each other, even when things are tough, even when you have to have really hard, difficult conversations. I think one of the difficult things about having a co-founder in a context, especially as them being your best friend, is that the relationship inevitably changes. So, you spend less time hanging out as best friends and more time as co-founders and business partners. And so, you miss a little bit of that. Just being able to kind of let loose and relax with each other is a little bit different.
It's hard to be both.
It is very hard to be both. And the other thing is, I think as the company matures and grows, your roles will start to shift. And so, being able to navigate that effectively, being able to offer criticism honestly to your best friend can be difficult, right? And likewise, just receiving that on the other end can be difficult. And so that is something that we're still navigating, but so far we've done a really good job, because one of the principles we always try to adhere to is just being honest with each other and communicating very often, and just letting no hard feelings get in the way, just making sure that we're all aligned on this mission that we're going after has been incredibly important. And so I'm very happy to say that our friendship is still very much intact. It's very strong. And as partners, we've also managed to find our roles and be in a really good spot as well.
Well, Brian, it was an honor to meet you, and I look forward to tracking your progress and keeping in touch as you grow. And I want to see that million mark, and then we want to have a party and be invited to it. Thank
Absolutely.
you for being on Further Ed. And once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
You've been watching Further Ed with your host, David Schnurman. Mr. Schnurman will be back with you next week at the same time. If you have any questions about this program, please send an email to info@furthered.com.